Okay, we're going to be discussing contingencies. This is the first part of practice chapter 11, and then also we'll be discussing a brief review of principles, my principles, chapters 10, 11, and 12. This is a really important lecture, especially if you're going to be taking the state exam. Really big. Hopefully you've spent a lot more time on this in your other classes because this is just a brief touch on these topics, but these are really good. This is really good to know. And a great review. So, okay, where we're at the buyer removing the contingencies. So we're going to discuss what these contingencies are, and this is where it happens that they will remove them. So let's get to it. So what is a contingency? So if a contract has a contingency clause, it defines specific conditions or actions that must take place before a real estate contract becomes binding. So with the contingency, if you submit an offer and it has a contingency in the contract, it's not binding yet until that contingency is removed. So the most common contingencies are physical inspection, appraisal, and financing. Those are the most common for residential real estate. You do have some estoppel certificate contingencies that you can get in commercial real estate, but we're not really going to discuss that because that is not part of for state exam purposes, and you don't really come across it often unless you are going into the commercial sector. So contingency removal. So there are two methods. We require active contingency removal. So it requires the buyer to actively sign a contingency removal form that removes the contingency contractually upon in the purchase agreement. So the buyer, for instance, or whoever has a contingency is going to be actively signing off on saying that they are removing it. Most residential transactions commonly use this method, whereas with passive contingency removal, it just occurs when the buyer does nothing and just allows the contingency to be removed by inaction. So let's say the contingency is for 17 days. If you didn't rescind the contract, for instance, after the 17th day, if the contingency if they felt like they wanted to continue on, they would just keep up with the contract and the contingency would be automatically removed on the 17th day. So this isn't really popular anymore. It was in the past, but now we commonly use the active contingency removal, and that really does show that there's no, for instance, it's harder to make a mistake by saying, oh, this is the 17th day, we still can get out of the contract. With passive, but maybe if it was passive, they were misreading it or counting the days wrong. And no, they can't get out of the contract due to that contingency because it was passive contingency removal. So that's why active is super important. So that is this for the introduction on contingency. We're going to then get into our other contingencies of physical inspection, appraisal, and financing contingencies. So make sure to stick around.